Your time and expertise are valuable, making focus one of the most important resources to have at work. These days, professionals spend nearly half the work week on written communication, and it can be difficult to stay on task with all the emails and documents you have to get through. With Grammarly as your AI writing partner, you can stay focused and quickly get through your work with relevant real-time suggestions wherever you write. It works across 500,000 apps and websites, so it can help with everything, from brainstorming presentation ideas to sounding more confident and persuasive in emails and reports. For 15 years, Grammarly has offered best-in-class communication support and enterprise-grade security on a business model that doesn't sell your data. 93% of professionals report that Grammarly helps them get more work done. Download Grammarly for free at Grammarly.com/podcast. That's GRAMMARLY.com/podcast.
Mr. Mo Kelly here on this King holiday. KFI AM 640, we're live everywhere on the iHeartRadio app. And I am a longtime disciple of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I don't go by all the other quotes that were more famous or popular, but there is one quote in which I guide my personal and professional life by. And it's real simple. It goes like this, quote, "There comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but he must do it because his conscience tells him it is right," close quote. And if there were a King quote that I think America is in need of adhering to or taking to heart, it's that one. There comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but he must do it because his conscience tells him it is right. I believe in right or wrong, not right and left. And there are a lot of things we can debate having to do with right and left, but I'm not really interested in those. I'm more interested in the right or wrong. So on this King holiday, I'm usually reflecting on that particular quote regarding the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. That said, let's get into why you didn't see me or hear me on Thursday and Friday. I went into Chicago, probably against better judgment given the time of year. I went into Chicago for a martial arts seminar. I was partially speaking to some young students in the Chicago area, helped teach one of the kids' class, and also I was there for a seminar for myself of a much more senior instructor, Marlon Sims. Now, you know, if you know anything about me, I'm not real big on flying. Oh, I'll do it. It doesn't keep me from getting on a plane because I like to travel. And for me to travel and do this and do that, do seminars and see the world, it means I got to get on a plane. Doesn't mean I'm comfortable with it. Doesn't mean I enjoy the experience. You know how you know how people usually, they try to soft shoe or undersell bad news? Like if you go to the dentist's office, they'll say, oh, well, you might feel just a little pinch. This may pinch a bit. If you go to the doctor's office, they say, you might feel a little prick. Stop it, Mark Runner. The point is they're underselling the bad news, which is coming, right? When I got on my flight to Chicago, and first, I'm never flying Southwest ever again in my life. I hate that airline. I'm sorry. And you come to the point where you just won't ever do something again. Well, I'm right at that point. I'm like the semi-alcoholic who had the last hangover. My head is in the toilet when it comes to flying with Southwest. I'm swearing on the porcelain god, I'm never flying with them again. Anyhow, got on the plane, got seated, and the flight attendant says, and this is something I've never heard before ever, and if you're a pilot, feel free to weigh in, hit me on Threads at Mr. Mo Kelly, or send me a direct message. The flight attendant said, we're going to keep the seatbelt sign on because we expect bad turbulence upon takeoff and landing. Now, I've heard a flight attendant say, we expect it to get a little bumpy, or we expect some turbulence here or there, so we're going to keep the seatbelt sign on. I've never heard a flight attendant come out and say explicitly, we expect bad turbulence upon takeoff and landing. We had the bad turbulence on takeoff, and maybe that had to do with some of the wind here in LA at the time. I don't know, but it wasn't great. Definitely wasn't great. The flight was pretty smooth. No issues. And I said, we're in the clear. And there wasn't a cloud in the sky when we were going to land in Chicago. I could tell. You know, if you see a lot of cloud covering, you think, ooh, it's going to be turbulent. Didn't see any of that. And then I was reminded it was the Windy City. And there's a point to this, and I'm going to relate it back to the California fires. All this is tied together. If you've ever flown into Chicago, it's rare that you will come in, and I'm flying into Midway, not O'Hare. Flying into Midway, it's rare that you're coming in from the Lake Michigan side. So in other words, you're not supposed to see water when you're flying in Chicago. You're supposed to see land, especially when you're coming from LA. And I noticed for the last 10 minutes or so of the flight, we're coming over the water, and we are low. Now, I can't tell you in an altimeter sense as far as how low we are. I just knew the water was a hell of a lot closer than I felt comfortable with. I'm guesstimating maybe 2,000 feet above the water. I'm thinking, and the turbulence is getting more and more severe as we're coming in for landing. And I'm thinking that, okay, the pilot has made a decision to get as low as possible to get under some of the winds or something, trying to avoid wind shear. I'm not a pilot, so if you're a pilot, just let me know what might have been going on. And you could tell the pilot, as the turbulence increased, was also increasing his speed, maybe to avoid a stall, maybe to avoid wind shear, something like that. But as the turbulence got worse, the pilot was hitting the gas, as they say. He was speeding up. We hit that runway so freaking hard, I thought he was going to bend the fuselage and send my ass to the pavement. No exaggeration. Well, a little bit of exaggeration, but it was so unsettling. And to combine that with the fact that there were at least 10 children under the age of 5. So everything is magnified. They had a problem with their ears popping, their ear pressure. So we dropped at a relatively quick rate of descent for the landing. The kids are crying. You have bad turbulence. The plane is yawing left and right. I'm like not screaming, but in my head, I'm like, ah! In my head, not out loud, because I got to keep my cool. You know, I got to make sure that no one can like film me or whatever. We come in for that really, really hard landing, and it's faster than any landing I've ever had. It's like the pilot said, we got to get this plane down and get it down quickly. I'm estimating the winds were about 20 to 25 miles an hour. I had to go back and check, but it was around that. And it was really bad turbulence. I say that to say, thank you, God, for getting me there safely. I say that to say, if a jet plane had that much issue with 20 to 25 mile an hour winds, what does that say for the 80 mile an hour winds that we are dealing with in parts of Southern California today? What does that say about the 100 mile an hour winds last week? It says that there are certain things you just cannot do during a firestorm. And some of that has to do with not having air support in which to fight the fires. And it was one of the worst, going back to the flight into Chicago, it's one of the worst flights I've ever had. It's one of those where it was clear that the pilot was concerned with how the wind was impacting the flight. Thank you, Microsoft. We hit that runway so hard and so quickly. It wasn't like even a gradual descent. He was almost going horizontally over the water for the last 10 minutes of the flight. And as soon as he came in near proximity to the runway, he slammed it down. And the kids started screaming and crying. Ah! And in my head, I was like, ah! We're all gonna die. And then when they put the full retro brakes on the air, you know, they reversed the engines to slow down, went full, and then the plane started bucking back and forth like the pilot almost lost control. It was a really, really bad flight. And I'm glad to say I made it through. Thank you, Southwest, for getting me there safely. I'm never flying you again. But I wonder, and here's the real point. If you are a pilot, hit me on Threads at Mr. Mo Kelly. I wonder whether that was my imagination regarding the very low approach, if that is to possibly avoid wind shear or the buffeting of the winds on the plane, or is it just something else? I would love to hear your input. But I was thinking the whole time, if I ever make it through this, I was going to tell the story about how wind can have a really, really big impact on aircraft. And I know if the winds were only like 20, 25 miles an hour, again, that's my estimate. I can't even imagine what 80 to 100 miles an hour would have done to any type of aircraft trying to do a water drop or a helicopter trying to fly over these fires. We will be talking about the fires tonight, and also we'll have updates and also the indications of possibly arson in one or more of these fires. Mark Ronner will have updates. I will have updates. We're going to talk to you about the inauguration of the new president, Donald J. Trump, and what that means in a variety of ways, from the pardons to also the executive actions what took place tonight. It's a big show. We got a lot to talk about, and we're going to be here until 10 o'clock tonight. It's Later with Mo Kelly. KFI AM 640. We're live everywhere in the iHeart.
Your time and expertise are valuable, making focus one of the most important resources to have at work. These days, professionals spend nearly half the work week on written communication, and it can be difficult to stay on task with all the emails and documents you have to get through. With Grammarly as your AI writing partner, you can stay focused and quickly get through your work with relevant real-time suggestions wherever you write. It works across 500,000 apps and websites, so it can help with everything, from brainstorming presentation ideas to sounding more confident and persuasive in emails and reports. For 15 years, Grammarly has offered best-in-class communication support and enterprise-grade security on a business model that doesn't sell your data. 93% of professionals report that Grammarly helps them get more work done. Download Grammarly for free at Grammarly.com/podcast. That's GRAMMARLY.com/podcast.
Radio app.
You're listening to Later with Mo Kelly on demand from KFI AM 640.
KFI, Mr. Mo Kelly. We're live everywhere on the iHeartRadio app. And of course, today is Inauguration Day. It's always on January 20th, and the peaceful transfer of power happens at noon Eastern time. This year, it was held indoors, supposedly because it was too cold outside. It really wasn't, but it was held indoors. But it gave a starkly different, I would say, picture of the process. It was much more intimate. You could hear more, you could see more. The details, the subtleties, they were easier to pick up. And this, of course, is that moment.
Defend.
Whoop, here we go. Computer hates me already.
Will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
So the 45th president is now the 47th president, and there's been plenty which has happened since that moment today. President Trump has been very active with not only his executive orders, but also his pronouncements of what he plans to do in the coming days. And it's hard to give an accurate sense of what all this means, because part of his executive actions were solely for the purpose of undoing what President Biden had done his first day in office, undoing his executive actions. And the other part was offering executive actions which would move forward his policy agenda. Does that mean that they'll stay in effect? I don't know. Does that mean that they're constitutional? Don't know. We don't know what the response will be, whether there'll be a lawsuit filed and be pushed up the ladder to the Supreme Court. But all of this is as Donald Trump prepared us for, warned us for, said he was going to do. You can say his promises made and promises kept. Yes, no, but we'll see whether his larger policy agenda actually happens. But one of his biggest promises he did follow through on, and I think Mark has a specific number, but more than 1,500 people connected to January 6th were given full pardons, and others were given commutations. I don't know the exact number.
Yeah, it was 1,500 or so, and I think Stuart Rhodes had his sentence commuted. He was the leader of the Oath Keepers.
Okay, so commuted, he's out though, nonetheless, correct?
Yeah, out from under a seditious conspiracy conviction, yes.
So everyone, as far as I know, connected to January 6th, regardless of whether they threw a fire extinguisher at a law enforcement officer, Capitol Police, or whether they engaged in some sort of violence, whether they just happen to be tripping through the Capitol, they have been set free. And I think as of tonight, everyone is supposed to be free. I don't know logistically whether that's viable, but from what I understand, everyone will be set free tonight. There will be, though, a long historical discussion of what that means going forward. Now, for the individuals, if you got a full pardon, it's very clear. It's white clean. But it does set a legal precedent for other dissenters to engage in similar behavior and also demand the same type of treatment. Yes, pardons are arbitrary, but at the same time, you may agree with these pardons. You may not agree with the next ones, which may be similar in nature. But we'll see what the future has to do with that. But it was a really full day. I got up early to watch all the proceedings, and there were some technical issues. I don't know what was happening with Carrie Underwood. I don't think she was supposed to sing a cappella, but she ended up singing a cappella. But it was this visual of two political parties in this highly partisan environment pushed very physically close together in the Capitol Rotunda. Obviously, you saw the former presidents, you can see the incoming administration. They are physically not more than 15, 20 feet apart. And you started listening to President Trump's inaugural address, and he didn't hold back, and he was basically spitting in the face of former President Biden right there. I know that was difficult to sit through. Whether you liked it or not, that was difficult to sit through. I don't know whether this is going to be indicative of the next 4 years. I do know that there's not a lot the Democrats will have to say about it. Not legislatively, not substantively, because if anything, Donald Trump has changed his approach from his first term. This term, he doesn't have anything except supplicants and sycophants. You have to demonstrate fealty and support at all costs. So there's no real buffer. There's no real pushback on anything that he plans to do or wants to do. Does that get him in trouble? Don't know. We'll see. But he's going to get more things than not. In other words, legislatively, he has a thin margin in the House. But if everyone's in alignment and in line, then he'll get past the House and he'll get past the Senate, and he'll obviously sign it. But I wonder how long that's going to last. I wonder, now this is not necessarily the honeymoon phase, because this is not an unknown quantity, but politics are sometimes fickle and politicians are sometimes unpredictable. But as it stands, he has no real roadblocks. I do say that to say anything that he does not get done, you can't blame on the Democrats. And anything which goes wrong, you can't blame it on the Democrats. Now, he will, but that's just being dishonest. There is nothing stopping him from getting his agenda done. He has, or I should say will have, every single person he wants in his cabinet. They weren't recommended to him. They were chosen by him. I think Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, is the first one to be confirmed today. And I don't know whom else. I think Pete Hegseth, for all the gnashing of teeth, he's probably going to be confirmed. I don't know if there's anyone who's not going to be confirmed. He's going to get all of his people. He will have the House. He will have the Senate. He will have a supermajority on the Supreme Court. There is nothing to be used as an excuse as far as his legislative agenda not getting done. Unless the Republicans mess this up. But you won't be able to blame it on the Democrats, because the Democrats will not be able to do anything except yell on TV. That is it. Now, they will provide some loyal opposition in the form of the filibuster. They will try to create controversy out of any type of situation. That's what you're supposed to do. But how effective it will be? Probably not effective at all. Because there are no levers for the Democrats to pull. They had an opportunity in November, and they didn't get the job done. And Donald Trump said what he was going to do. And like it or not, he started doing it today. It's Later with Mo Kelly, KFI AM 640. We're live everywhere on the iHeartRadio app. We're going to get into some of the fires because we know that the Santa Ana winds are here, and they're going to be here probably into Wednesday. And we'll tell you about LA's new rebuilding czar and what that is all about.
You're listening to Later with Mo Kelly on demand from KFI AM 640.
And just to give you some fire relevant information, you've been hearing KFI talk about the Chambers fire. We can tell you, and the Chambers fire was at the area of Chambers Street and Gilbert Street in Hemet in Riverside County. We can share that forward progress has been stopped on that Chambers fire. That's good news. And also, you may have heard the Griffith Park fire, which began earlier today. I want to say around 1:30 p.m. The flames were mostly under control, but that story has evolved because there is a person in custody who has been arrested in connection with the fire. I don't know if the person is arrested under suspicion of arson, but that is what we're waiting to see. His identity has not been released, and that kind of dovetails into what I want to talk about this segment. At the beginning of the show, I was talking about my trip to Chicago and the perilous journey just to land there. When I got to Chicago, obviously when people learned that I was from LA, you know what the number one question was. First, I appreciate the question about, hey, is your house, your family safe? But they were wondering what was the deal with all of the fires. And for people who don't live here or who were not here when the fires first broke out, as far as the Palisades fire, largely there was no context. As far as they knew, all of LA was burning. There was no distinction to be made between LA City and LA County. They didn't know where Altadena was. They don't know the differences, the subtle differences between the different areas, or outside of maybe just Pacific Palisades and the idea that everyone is rich in Pacific Palisades. So I had to explain over and over again, Altadena is in this area, Pacific Palisades is in that area. And also, they didn't know, or at least it hasn't been widely reported, that there was a component to all this, which is connected to arson or attempted arson. We've seen more and more attempts, at least, and more people have been arrested in connection to possible attempted arson. And to outsiders, they didn't know that, or they didn't suspect that was a portion of this story. And I had to remind them and explain to them some of these fires were definitely organic. They happened because of dry brush and circumstances, maybe an exploding transformer like in Altadena, but others were man-made disasters and people who were trying to take advantage of the moment, trying to enterprise and expand their criminal opportunities by starting a fire, creating a mandatory evacuation zone so people would leave their houses and the area for a greater attempt at looting and other types of burglary. And people were shocked. Now, I'm speaking to folks in the south side of Chicago. Okay, they're not unfamiliar with the idea of crime, but they were aghast when I was explaining how, yes, there is a looting contingent. Yes, there is an arson contingent. And then they better understood why these fires, at least on a smaller level, were popping up in different parts of the city, but completely geographically disconnected. And since I was not in LA, I could see how the coverage, and this is where local news is so very important. When I say local news, I'm talking about stations like KFI. I'm talking about local television stations like KCAL 9 and KTLA and ABC 7 and NBC 4, because they are able to put you in a place where you can best understand what is happening on the ground. When I'm in Chicago, 2,500 miles away, I had no real sense. Yes, I had the Watch Duty Fire app, and I had my apps to get my information. But as far as news coverage was concerned, I had to know to go to the local news portals to get the relevant information to really know what was happening in my own city. And it was a constant reminder how important it is, especially when we're talking about KFI, that we remain committed to giving you information first and foremost. That's what it told me. It told me how essential it was, because here I am, and I am someone who was basically studying the fire since day one. And when I was not in the area, I couldn't get that essential information without reminding myself I have to go directly to KFI, or I have to go directly to a local television news outlet. And Mark Ronner and I have talked about how important news, actual news is, not analysis, but news in the coverage of these disasters and these fires. And it just made it even more, I'll say, egregious when I couldn't get that information, when I was depending on the national quote unquote news or cable news to give me some sense of what was happening in LA. And I hate agreeing with Mark Ronner.
Go ahead, let it out.
No, it hurts. It hurts to agree with you. I could see how local news is going to continue to struggle to survive, because it's easier and less expensive to just give a very cursory glance at these important stories and then miss the main story.
News gathering and reporting costs money. And always remember who benefits from the absence of it, okay?
Yeah.
It's people who want to get away with stuff. And by the way, the coverage of the fires, there was so much BS to wade through. We worked really hard here at KFI to stay on top of things and get people information that they urgently needed in a life and death situation. It seemed unconscionable to me, some of the stuff other people were saying on air in a variety of different venues.
Let me now connect this to social media, because we talk about information, misinformation, disinformation. I could see, not understand or agree with, I could see how someone outside of Los Angeles could take their cursory view from whatever news source that is not local to form their opinion, which is ill-informed, misinformed, uninformed, and use that to run rampant on social media, spreading just abject lies and so forth. Because when I was in Chicago, tying all this together, I was fed back the lies that they heard or believed from their coverage, not understanding the topography, the demographics, and what was actually happening in these different communities. They had no understanding the difference between Pacific Palisades and Altadena.
That's understandable, but at the fundamental level of this is basic decency, and people don't need your pro wrestling smack talk in the middle of such a disaster.
Hey, look, you ought to say that like 10 times and louder and you know, megaphone and. Ooh.
Yeah, I thought I was going to give myself a heart attack because we were already fairly stressed here, staying on top of the situation. But then listening to some of the horrific things that people were saying for no good reason at all, just to have your hot take, whatever, just astonishing.
Along those lines, also, most of the people that I encountered had no idea what Santa Anas were. That's the biggest part of the story. That's the biggest part of the story. That's why people don't understand, well, why couldn't they do this? Why couldn't they do that? Well, we had 80 to 100 mile an hour winds. And speaking of the winds, the National Weather Service, as we told you earlier, I'll tell you again, has issued another red flag warning from 10 a.m. earlier today to 10 p.m. tomorrow night for much of inland Southern California. And when you combine that with the attempted arson, when you combine that with the continued dryness, then you see how precarious a moment we are living in Southern California, where although we may have gotten past the worst of the previous fires of last week, in other words, there's considerable containment concerning Pacific Palisades, Altadena, and any other fire that we've been discussing prior to today. But we may be looking at another group of fires tomorrow just because of the Santa Ana winds, just because of this attempted arson, which we're seeing more and more of. This is a very complex and complicated issue. It's not about just raking the forest. It's Later with Mo Kelly. KFI AM 640. We are live everywhere in the iHeartRadio app. And when we come back, did you know that there's a list of the healthiest, air quotes, burgers in America? And I love me a burger. I got to see if my favorite burger's on this list. I looked at Stephanie. He said, he needs to find out. We need to get to the bottom of this.
Oxymoron. There's no such thing.
Yes, there is. And we'll tell you about them next.
You're listening to Later with Mo Kelly on demand from KFI AM 640.
And I don't eat a lot of red meat anymore for a lot of reasons, health reasons, preferences, every once in a while. And I mean, in a rare once in a while, I'll get me a burger like from Morton's Steakhouse. Get a burger? Yes. I like their smash burgers. But that's at most once every 6 months. At one point, I was down to one burger a month because I love me some burgers. Now it's about maybe one burger every 3 to 4 months. I can count on my one hand how many times I have red meat in a year. Not something I've consciously been trying to do. It's just I don't have as much of a taste for it anymore. But I loved me some burgers back in the day. And part of the reason I can't eat them now or shouldn't eat them now is because they're not all that healthy. When you start figuring out the saturated fat, the sodium, all the stuff that your doctor says you need to eat less of, can't have the burgers like I used to.
All the stuff that makes it so good.
It's so good. Tastes so good. But according to this list on Yahoo, I'm getting ready to tell you about the 7 healthiest burgers. And I think healthiest should be in air quotes because it's relative to other burgers. You know, it's almost like the 7 healthiest forms of crack. You know,
the healthiest candy.
Yeah. So I don't know if healthiest is, you know, the least horrible on your body. How about that? So coming in at number 7 as far as the healthiest burgers in America. Shake Shack hamburger. It's relatively, this is what they say, it's relatively low in calories, 370, has 24 grams of carbs, 8 grams of saturated fat, and a whopping 850 milligrams of sodium. The 7th best, 850 milligrams of sodium.
That's kind of shocking because they're pretty small.
Yeah, that's the point. And if you're wondering, well, you shouldn't really have more than maybe 1,800 grams of sodium per day. And I struggle with that. I really do. Coming in at number 6 of the healthiest hamburgers out there. Culver's Butterburger. I haven't had this one. It does have the highest caloric count, 390 for a single with no toppings. It has 38 grams of carbs, 7 grams of saturated fat, and 480 milligrams of sodium. And also 20 grams of protein. Yeah, okay. Healthiest.
It sounds good. Butterburger?
Look, they all sound good. I would eat all of them in a heartbeat. All right?
I agree.
It really just comes down to taste. If I'm going to get a burger, I'm not counting calories of the burger or the fat of the burger. I'm just eating it. Number 5 is the Whataburger Jr. And I had Whataburger once and never again. I'm not a fan of the joint at all.
I've heard, yeah, it's pretty divisive. I haven't had one, but it's either you hate it or you love them.
Don't waste the time.
Okay.
310 calories, 36 grams of carbs, sodium content, 750 milligrams. If you're going to put that much sodium in there, it better taste good. And it did not. That's number 5. It has 14 grams of protein, but you know, I'm not eating burgers for protein. I can get protein anywhere.
It's like the people that get the pizza and they dab it with a napkin. It's like, what are you saving?
Like, not only that, or the people who get pizzas like, well, I got tomato sauce. That's the vegetable group. Or, you know, I got the meat group. And they give you all these BS reasons why pizza's healthy. No, it just tastes good. I love pizza. And I know better. Coming in at number 4 of the healthiest hamburgers in America. In and out. In and out. That's what a hamburger is all about. 360 calories. The classic hamburger. 37 grams of carbs, 4.5 grams of saturated fat, and 660 milligrams of sodium. Can you taste the difference between 750 and 660 milligrams of sodium? I don't know, but your blood pressure can. It's true. And if you get like the animal style, it's down to 200 calories, 4.5 grams of saturated fat, 390 milligrams of sodium, meaning get rid of the bread. The bread is where a lot of the sodium is. Not all of it, but a lot.
I thought animal style was the topping. It's like the dressing or something on top of it.
Animal style is just a lettuce wrap, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, no. Protein style is lettuce wrap. Animal style is like what Mark said is like the sauce, but you can get it on the fries too.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Learn something new every day.
Good stuff.
Coming in number 3, the healthiest hamburgers in America. Get out of here. The classic McDonald's burger.
This list is illegitimate.
Okay.
The classic burger has 13 grams of protein, 250 calories, 30 carbs, 3.5 grams of saturated fat, and 510 milligrams of sodium. When I was a kid, I'd eat like 3 or 4 of these at a time.
I was going to say, it's like the Bud Light of burgers because you can like stack them and eat them like nothing.
All the bread, everything. I just eat
They're
them like
so thin.
Tic Tacs.
Yeah.
I want Ronald in front of a congressional committee promptly.
Leave Ronald alone. He's had a lot of issues.
Leave Ronald alone.
Number 2. Burger King's Whopper Jr.
I believe that. Those are pretty no nonsense. They're allegedly flame broiled.
I like them taste-wise better than McDonald's.
Yeah, there's a little bit more flavor there.
Has a little bit more protein than McDonald's. Has 15.2 grams of protein, as opposed to 13 for McDonald's. 310 calories, as opposed to 250 for McDonald's. 27 grams of carbs. McDonald's has 30 grams of carbs. And Burger King's Whopper Jr. is 5 grams of saturated fat. McDonald's is 3.5 saturated fat. But here's what put Burger King's Whopper Jr. above classic McDonald's burger. Only 390 milligrams of sodium. So it's the second healthiest burger in America. And coming in at number 1. Wendy's Junior Hamburger.
Never would have guessed.
280 calories, 4 grams of saturated fat, 440 milligrams of sodium, 15 grams of protein, and just 25 grams of carbs. So if you want a healthier hamburger relative to other hamburgers, coming in at number 1 is Wendy's Junior Hamburger. But I can't just eat just one. That's the problem. That's why I stay away from them.
Are those the square ones?
Yeah. And it's funny because I always go to them for the chili and stuff, and me and Tuala kind of bonded over that. And like, dude, you like we forget how good the burgers are. They're just
I don't. I dream of them mother fathers all the time.
But they're so good every single time. But like you said, I could eat 2 or 3 of them.
And the problem is, I'm not going to eat just 2 or 3 of them. There're going to be some fries with it.
Yep.
Most likely with salt on them, too.
Who wants to live forever?
It's not, I don't want to live forever. I just don't want to die horribly and unexpectedly and painfully, like having a heart attack, knock on wood. That's all I'm saying.
Well, that's the right diet for it.
What, the hamburgers?
Oh, yeah. Scarf them right down.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mark. I'm going to try to stay around. KFI AM 640. We're live everywhere on the iHeartRadio app.
You can listen to KFI everywhere, like you haven't noticed.
KFI.
And KOST HD2.
Los Angeles, Orange County.
Live everywhere on the iHeartRadio app.